and welcome to Breaking the Gridlock, Gen Z's role in energising sustainable digital transport futures. We all know there's lots of stereotypes around Gen Z. We're apparently impatient, idealistic, and addicted to technology. However, in a transforming sector, these are actually massive strengths and really bring the energy and adaptability we need to address the challenges in our sector. So what is changing? As we've seen in many different roundtables, panel discussions already in this conference, transport's being reshaped by many different things. We have digitalisation, the introduction of AI and automation, devolution, which means that more decisions are being made locally, public sector reform, which is changing how services are run and funded all up and down the country, and climate urgency, accelerating the need for sustainable systems. But transport isn't just about movement. It's about access to opportunity, well-being, sustainability, and economic growth. And as Gen Z, we play a massive part into the future and what these systems will look like. So we're here off the back of a series of roundtables that Arcadis, in association with Adept and Meetings of Minds, ran last year. These were 90-minute sessions across the UK. So we had one in Manchester on energy, one in Birmingham on place. Bristol's was around climate resilience and environment, and London's was digital and data. So today on our lovely panel, we have representatives from each of these conversations, and we're going to explore further how we can create transport to be happier and healthier, what the industry could look like in 20 years' time, and what skills and mindsets do we need, and what ambitions for the sector will Gen Z inherit. So I'm now delighted to introduce our lovely panel, who bring experience across transport, placemaking, and public and private sectors. So panel, please could you introduce yourself and share an insight shaping how you think about the future of transport.
Hello, so my name's Susie Lawton. I'm an assistant project manager at the West of England Combined Authority. I've been there for 2 years and have had time to work on bus, rail, and as of about 3 weeks ago, I've moved on to micromobility. So please, no questions on e-scooters. Haven't quite done my homework on that yet. One insight, from a combined authority perspective, I'm particularly excited around devolution and having that opportunity for greater coordination across ourselves. I think there is a level of consistency across the transport modes that we would really benefit from, and I think interchanges and mode changes are the most important thing that we can improve to improve that customer experience of transport across the country, not just in our region.
Brilliant. Hi, Marcus. I work for Muse, Development Manager. Muse is a place-based regeneration, so we work in partnership with councils across the country to transform town centres. And so, town centres are these places where everybody kind of comes together, we have these interchanges and people kind of interact and, live their lives really. So my biggest change that I think we're going to see is, we see it every day, it's nothing new, it's the shift away from car-centred planning. And I feel like that's the biggest thing really, all these different changes in transport, for example, with bus infrastructure, scooters and people use trains. It's first of all about moving away from the car. And I think that's probably going to be the biggest challenge over the next 20 years. And it's the biggest challenge we face with most of our schemes across the country. It's that big shift. So that's kind of where I see us going over the next 20. Not as exciting as e-scooters, but definitely moving away from the car, from a car-led planning. So yeah.
Great. Lovely to meet you all. So I am Amy. I work with Holly at Arcadis. My background's slightly different. So I come from civil engineering, but more recently I work in our intelligent buildings team. So I explore all things digital, data, technology to go out within our built environment, say places and spaces. I'm most excited of how we can best apply that to transport. I think we're scratching the surface at the moment of what we can do, and there's kind of some hurdles to get over, but as we start to make the most of the technology that is already existing within our space and how we can best apply that to improve the transport infrastructure that we have.
Yeah, great. Nice to be here. My name is Maeve and I work for Transport for Greater Manchester in the policy team. I've been in this role for about 6 months, so still pretty new. And my policy areas at the moment are autonomous vehicles, so definitely looking towards future technology, drones, so again the same thing, and school travel behaviour change, so trying to understand how to get young people to use the public transport network, which I think would be something I personally think would be great to see in the next 20 years of transport, to see that like wraparound effect of helping younger people feel comfortable in starting their journey on public transport, to embed those travel trends.
Brilliant, thank you, thanks very much. So I'm going to jump into the first question. Amy, I'm going to come to you first. So what new waves of change are emerging in the transport industry, and how do you see this impacting the next 20 years? It's a long time.
Yeah, won't be retired by then, hopefully. So yeah, a great question. I'm probably a bit biased towards technology and AI and digital and data in that sense, that I think kind of the first step, maybe looking short scale to start with, the next 5-10 years, I'm excited about kind of understanding more and the knowledge that we can gain from the data of our spaces, so how people are using different types of transport and using that to power some of our decision making, but getting to the point where we feel comfortable with the data we're collecting and able to use that to influence some decisions. And then kind of looking further into the future is how we can lean into more of the kind of technology and automation and artificial intelligence to optimise some of the processes we go through, whether that be through kind of maintenance and operation of our infrastructure, how we can better improve proactive maintenance rather than reactive maintenance, understanding where problems are starting to occur before they've actually happened. And I would be a fool not to mention autonomous vehicles. I feel like you might have something to add in there as well, but excited to see what road that's going to lead us down, and not limited to cars, but trains, planes. What it could be in 20 years, I think, is really exciting, and how we can best support kind of our future leaders in doing that is really, really where we're heading.
Great, thank you. I think that's a natural segue into you, Maeve. Would you like to answer that question next? Do you have anything to say on autonomous vehicles?
I think that definitely autonomous vehicles are in a very interesting place at the moment. They hold a lot of potential for increasing the transport networks to areas where potentially there's low demand, so it doesn't make financial sense for a bus or a tram to be there, but there's still people there who need access to the regional centre and need access to healthcare and things like that. So autonomous vehicles can really help with the first and last mile problems, getting people to the transport hubs to connect them elsewhere. But also there is, I guess, a danger of autonomous vehicles being placed in cities just as a commercial opportunity for companies like, think of the companies that do autonomous vehicles, Uber or Waymo. Obviously they're trying to run a business. It doesn't always align with what the strategy for the city is. There's, I think, lots of conversations to be had about compromises and how these businesses can still run a profitable service, while also offering the best benefit to the people in the city region for connection to public transportation.
Yeah, definitely agree with you there. But I think also, to come back to Amy's point as well, I think it's really important to get the basics right first. And I think it's great to talk about driverless cars and the innovation. I think it's really good that we do those things, but I feel like one of the things we do really poorly in the UK is doing more than one thing at the same time. And so I feel like especially with technology and coming forward with that, understanding, for example, how people actually use those places and having that data correct to inform, for example, transport modelling, or to monitor how people are using a newly designed space. I think that's really important to actually develop that first as a really good foundation, as well as also developing driverless cars and all these different things, because I feel like sometimes the way the public see it necessarily is that they look at a big shiny driverless car and that's a change they can see. That's something they're going to look at straight away, but not necessarily the digital infrastructure that sits behind those things. And so I feel like sometimes we get a bit sidetracked maybe on the driverless cars and the AI and all these other bits that people can see and on a daily basis, whereas I feel like we need to work more on using technology to build that good foundational base to then help us make decisions about driverless cars in the future, and things like where you're going to put electric scooters, or how it interacts with the city centre. So I kind of agree to disagree there. It's like there's a good balance, I think, between both of those things, that if we can do things at one time, which it seems really difficult to do in the UK, I think there's something good that can come of that there.
That aligns to one core principles we work in is just because you can doesn't mean you should. And it's understanding what we're doing at the moment and making sure we're doing that really well. And because autonomous vehicles, they might be good for some places, like you say, for the kind of last mile journeys, it doesn't mean we should be kind of dominated by it. And for the piece of the puzzle that takes up compared to the rest of the transport infrastructure, where should we be focusing? That's, an interesting point.
I think, coming on from getting the basics right, as it were, as Marcus said earlier, the transport system has to be a real, genuine first choice to private car usage, and in order to do that, it has to be as easy for a person to do it. Otherwise, they just aren't going to make that change, and that is fundamental to addressing the climate issue. And I think a large part of that, something that I'm very happy, I'm working at the closing end of the Mobility Hubs project in the west of England, where those kind of spaces, we've got an amazing flagship site at UE, where it's this space where people can get to the bus, get on their e-bikes, charge whatever they need to charge, go to the loo, go to a cafe, use the Wi-Fi. That sort of customer experience and those spaces where people can mode shift and they have that convenience and that customer experience, I think that is something really, really exciting, and I'm hoping that we'll see more of that as we move forward.
Great, thank you. Yeah, that's brilliant. Moving on to the next question. Maeve, I'm going to come to you for this one. So, as professionals earlier on in their career, as we are, how do you think that we approach change differently to other generations?
I think that two big things really come to mind thinking about how maybe I approach things slightly differently. I think that people coming into their early career are much more used to systems changing. If you think about, these are people who are coming into the workforce just as COVID is finishing, maybe went through uni while COVID was happening, have seen the massive rise of AI, which is even a couple of years ago seemed like something that would never happen. So I think have much more take things much more seriously that might seem like something that would never happen. I think that, for example, my work with the autonomous vehicles, I know a lot of people who are in charge of taxis, which obviously is quite a stressful place to be in if you think about autonomous vehicles coming in to take all of the business, haven't really considered that these autonomous vehicles might be seen on roads at the end of this year, next year, and I think that it's something that the younger generation can't afford to not take seriously, that these kind of fringe innovation projects might be something that is completely shaping how transport is going to look like in the next 20 years. And I also think that as a younger generation, people have this ability to change systems when things aren't working, like a comfortability to learn new things and change direction when things aren't working. But on the flip side of that, also have a healthy skepticism about systems. So this is things like computer systems or AI that seems to be, widely touted as a good thing, and everybody should be using AI. I think that coming from a position of always being advertised towards, always being marketed towards, and never having that break from the digital world, gives the younger generation like a healthy skepticism of things coming in from that angle, and we take a second to think about, is this actually the solution, or are the more traditional systems maybe the way to go?
That's a good point. I feel like many people look at young people and think we're easily influenced. I think, and we're all known as the glass half full generation. I know in my office when, for example, we look at if we're going to get something back from a consultant or something back from a local authority, I think we're always the ones to say, I'll be here next week. And there's always an eye roll in the room, like, oh yeah, more like 2 or more like 3. And I feel like it's more of that yeah, we do appreciate there are these challenges and there are these difficulties, but at the same time, we are also highly cynical as well. You know, we use social media all the time and we're exposed to these things that are, you know, not necessarily real, not necessarily fake. You know, we're making those judgments within a millisecond, you know, when we're scrolling through on social media or interacting with social media. And we're doing these things on a daily basis. So we're kind of been bred to be skeptical, but at the same time, have a really good judgment on what's going to happen next. And I feel like that's something that the different generations to us can kind of take on in terms of, you know, giving us the space to kind of be the skeptical person in the room and kind of, you know, have that conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that it comes with like an inherent ability to like dig into things and think, well, this seems like it will work, but because of my experience, like maybe having more skills with technology, you can immediately say, oh, this and this and this will be the problem. But I think, in my opinion, a worrying trend is that everything is more digitalized. And in my opinion, I think the less things are on a screen, the better. Like the more physical buttons, the less likely it is to break. I don't know if anybody agrees with that.
Yeah, I think it's, as a generation, we are quite resilient as we've kind of come up through COVID. And I think what's interesting is the way we learn, I think, is very different to how people have historically learned things, that we're not necessarily taught facts as much as we are taught how to learn and how to develop and how to ask those questions that you're talking about. That means that we have the ability to kind of challenge more the status quo from our position within our careers that we're at, which does help us kind of drive that innovation and change and get us to places like being sat on this stage here in the early years of our career. But it gives us kind of the opportunity to accelerate some of that change that's going to come in, and whether that be making sure we have the right kind of policy and governance around some of the new kind of technology. AI is the easy one that's coming in. I think it's a important and a strong skill set that we have.
Yeah, I think we're less likely to accept that we do things that way because that's the way they've always been. Because a lot of the time there is, you know, speaking with older colleagues, there is nothing relatable about their stories of entering the workplace. My first job was completely remote. My first meetings, my first presentations were all completely done online. You know, it must have been a year into a job before I actually was standing doing, you know, this is crazy to me right now that I'm doing this. Yeah, it's real people in the real room, which is mental. But, you know, I think it also lends itself to when we have conversations around work culture and, you know, work-life balance isn't a nice to have anymore. It's an expectation that we have because we've proven that we can work from home and we can, you know, we've proven that we can be just as productive, and we've learned how to use those tools to do that.
Definitely. And this is change that needs to be led by us, right? We're the people at the start, or more close to the start of our careers, and the people that will see this grow and understand the skills that are needed to use technology very well. And it's almost like, why should that just be filtered down to us and then we're told how to do things? Like, why can't we be leading the way with all the skills we have? And that's kind of one of the purpose of the discussion today, to sort of spread that message. And yeah, I mean, have you ever experienced any challenges when trying to implement innovative ways of doing things at work? Or any pushback that you can share on the panel?
I am probably an easy one in that sense. So I consistently working to see what type of technologies we can put into buildings and places, and the kind of classic of AI, GDPR, what data can we gather, what do we need to notify people of, and how we best approach that. Probably not from my own, but as a world we're developing to accept technology and the power it may bring and the value it may add. But the immediate question, there's always skepticism around, say, video analytics on a CCTV camera of counting people. I don't want it looking at my face. I don't want it seeing who I am. And kind of the understanding of actually this is how it works. I think as kind of people, we want to understand how things work generally and what's happening, that you'll always hit with that resistance. But I would also say over the last kind of few years, the attitude is changing, that people are more excited about kind of technology and what's coming in and what our generation are kind of pushing into the built environment, and the opportunity it presents, the power of data and how you can't argue with it.
Yeah. I think there's also a problem with funding there as well. I mean, being fairly new to the industry, I didn't realise, it sounds quite ironic, but how structured the UK is and how it funds infrastructure projects, and how local authorities and councils can actually get grant funding for different projects, and it's quite piecemeal. It almost sometimes feels like grants and pots become available, and then local authorities look to those pots to say, what gap can this pot fill, or what great initiative that we've got can this pot fill, and then it's really difficult to kind of have that long-term outlook. And I feel like with technology, hopefully coming forward, it can help break down some of that decision making and kind of sift through those different projects, in terms of to their value and what benefit they're going to bring, and cost benefit analysis, but also adding, we were talking earlier, weren't we, about not just the cost benefit analysis, but also measuring things that are more difficult to measure that AI can helpfully hope measure as well. And it's just about convincing that using AI to measure these things is a really good tool to bring that forward.
Yeah, it's almost about using AI critically, not just using it for ease and so you don't have to work as hard, but actually taking its outputs, being critical and creating like better outputs and more thought out solutions and better decisions.
Yeah, I think there's something, potentially AI is too easily accessible in some ways. I think that the climate impact of AI is really important to consider, and I do understand it has its place, and there are some elements where there is just so much data that humans just can't do it, and so I can understand the role in it, but I don't really understand why it's being used to write meeting notes or things like that, which in itself is a learning exercise, and I know it feels quite. Yeah, no. I mean, I can understand it's easy, but, maybe it's because we're at the beginning of our careers and, normally, well, certainly if I go into a room quite often, I'm the minute taker. And for me, that's how I've learnt this industry, because I can go back through those notes and, like, if I'm learning something for the first time and writing something down, I mean, that is how I've learnt. So I think I would maybe say, it has its place, but maybe we're a little bit too eager to use it a bit too much potentially in our everyday lives. So
With the correct governance policy of how we can do it safely but effectively,
exactly.
I would say just a challenge a little bit is we're in the AI revolution. It's happening. Mm-hmm. It's making a difference, and it's like the Industrial Revolution. We didn't always think we would have cars, trains across the whole country, that we do need to sometimes embrace the change so we can progress and move forward and upskill our kind of people coming through into their careers to the point where they can meet the new expectation that AI brings.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and this is why I say I do see it has value. I just think maybe it's a little overused potentially. But anyway,
we can debate this all day long, can't we? We have
anyway. Continue. Yeah.
Great, thank you. So we've spoken a bit about, quite a lot around AI and digitalisation and climate urgency and the impacts on the environment. So I guess maybe considering more around the public sector reform and devolution. Susie, I'm going to come to you first. So what skill sets do we need to grow to accelerate progress in this area and respond to the changes in how we're planning for transport and the way people travel?
I think I want to slightly challenge this idea of accelerating progress, because there seems to be a lot of the conversation is kind of how quickly can we implement the new development and how quickly can we do the new thing. And I think the skills that we've already talked quite a lot about, that I think Gen Z is quite good at, is this sense of skepticism and really sort of picking apart everything and asking the questions. Because, in the most cliched way possible, yes, we brought up in this digital world, but it's true, and we are in this space where anyone can say anything at any time for any reason and claim to be an expert at it, and you can't just accept anything at face value and think we have to do this because this is the next thing that we need to do. We need to be asking the questions of actually what are the benefits and what are the disbenefits of what we're introducing, and not just be introducing it because it's the next thing on the table. So that's what I'm very passionate about. But, you know, I think, I think I'll leave it there.
I do think that's so hard, though, for councils and local authorities to do, in terms of to not think fast-paced. And it comes back to the point about funding I made earlier, is that, you know, funding is only available for a limited amount of time for a certain number of things. And I feel like it's so difficult for them to balance being able to move fast and be agile to, you know, have access to that funding, because it only comes around, you know, once every year, all different grants come through once every few years. And I feel like it's about having that balance between being agile and about knowing what's the right thing to invest in.
Yeah.
I always think it's such a difficult tightrope to walk, and we see it all the time. We work in partnerships with councils and local authorities. It's, you know, making sure we're making the right decisions with the grant funding we've got there at the moment in time. And it's like, how do we make that informed decision to know that this is the right thing? And I do think that's always the biggest challenge about being agile and, you know, fast enough, not too fast to the point where you're making the right decision. You know, it's really difficult, and I don't know how, you know, people respond to that. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, and you know, I agree. I mean, we live that, and I think, you know, maybe that's the issue. Maybe the issue is because funding comes in these little gates, and it's, you have to spend it within this certain amount of time. It doesn't allow that. You're right. It forces your hand, and you have to go ahead with something. I think maybe if there was a bit more flexibility around that, then that would really help with that overall agility. I mean, obviously, you know, can't change that overnight, can we? No.
Transport planning can be so reactive as well. It makes it hard to have that longer term vision and sit down and think what is actually the right path to go down, to look at what transport might look like in 20 years, when it's always thinking about what needs to happen now or needs to be fixed now.
Yeah, and that's the issue as well, because between the different transport modes, the implementation period of each one is so vastly different. I mean, for a rail project, you're looking at 10, 15 years. For e-scooter, you could put in a new parking space tomorrow if you wanted to. And making sure that that integration across all of the different modes and making sure that you're looking at that timeline is incredibly difficult.
What skill sets would you say that we need to improve in order to get there, though?
I guess it's that more like holistic thinking and cross-modal thinking as well. I think sometimes it can be quite easy to get into a bit of a rabbit hole and get quite siloed in whatever transport mode you're looking at, whatever your project is at that point. There needs to be some sort of overarching vision of the whole network that you're looking at. So, you know, yeah, that holistic thinking, I think, is the most important thing.
I suppose go ahead, sorry.
No, after you.
No, I suppose that's the job of the combined authorities, isn't it? That you know, that's the role of devolution, isn't it? To kind of pass it down to them, and to kind of, for them to actually have the proper decision-making power and the resources to decide where these things go. You know, and I suppose that's hopefully where it stems from.
Absolutely.
And I think it's happening in Manchester now. I'm from Birmingham, proud Brummie, but I can kind of appreciate that it's happening in Manchester now with the B network and everything that's going on there. And so I think it's going to be flush out devolution that happens, and we kind of see how the impact that has on decision making, and, you know, all the different bits, you know.
Yeah, no, and that's really exciting for us as well.
I was going to kind of pull it back to getting the principles right to start with, and having kind of the skill sets and around understanding what we currently have and what we're doing. So going back to the right kind of policy and governance around new systems that we're introducing. We are kind of in a period of rapid change at the moment, and how we can best support ourselves and set ourselves up for the future. And also using kind of facts and figures to support our decision making. So kind of going back to the data where we have it, it does exist everywhere. Let's tap into what we've already got to make sure we kind of have the people, kind of our generation, the stuff we can do with data is pretty amazing. Let's lean into that and make sure we have the facts and figures behind the decisions we're making.
I would say the communication is key. I think that everybody's opinion has its place, and it's important that people have space to be able to say what they think and what they think the next best steps should be. And if everybody can be on the same page, everyone can be at least in the same book, then one step closer to the answer.
Yep, I think that's a great point, thank you. And leads well nicely into our next question. So we know and we've discussed how important it is to connect with peers and communities to drive meaningful change, but how should we be doing this? Perhaps beyond surveys and consultations as we move towards cleaner and smarter transport systems? Marcus?
Do you know what? I think that's a great question. And this is the thing that I think about all the time. And the honest answer is, I really don't know. And the reason behind that is because, I mean, Muse is a placemaker. We look at towns, we look at cities, and we look at the ways people work and interact with these spaces. A lot of these towns are car-centred. You know, they're based on the fact that somebody drives in from a suburban area into the city centre, parks at a car park and goes to the office. When we're reimagining these town centres, we're changing the way people interact with these places, and it's about changing their mindset. And I feel like it's something that we don't do well enough as an industry, is have a look at, okay, so I wouldn't go to a community and tell them one day they're living differently to the next. And so the question is, why do we do that with our town centres? And it's about how do we bring the communities who interact with these town centres along with that journey? A lot of the schemes that we do, we are changing the way that people interact with the town centre. I work in Solihull on our Whole Beach Place master plan, and that master plan it's a car light scheme. It's based around people using the public infrastructure, using buses, trains, and other modes of transport in the area, for example the West Midlands Cycle Hire scheme, to kind of get around and to try and communicate to the communities that are already there that this is going to be the new way forward for the town centre, because this is how the town centre can sustain itself, because people are now, you know, driving to retail parks rather than driving to a town centre. That's a really difficult conversation to have, and it's really hard to communicate what the benefits of that are, because a lot of these, as you said, infrastructure schemes and transport schemes are so far away, you know, like 10 to 15 years, most of these things. And I don't know about you, but I can sometimes find it very difficult to look forward to next year. I know what's going to happen next year. And I feel like it's something like we sit in these meeting rooms and we develop these strategies, and we look at driverless cars or drones and all these other things. It sounds great in isolation, but then we implement them and then maybe people didn't use it in the way they thought they were going to use it. And, you know, or for example, a cycle lane, which you thought was going to be great, is actually rubbish. People don't actually use it. And it's like, well, why does that happen? And in my opinion, I think it comes down to that communication piece, because we develop it, we install it, but sometimes we struggle to bring the community on that conversation. And I personally don't know how we can better that through, you know, public consultation, you know, and engagement. We engage with communities all the time, you know, as part of our process, and you know, we sit down people in the draw on plans, and you know, we do partnerships with schools, colleges, and you know, council. We do possibly every form of public consultation you possibly do, and we bring people in so they actually shape the community and shape the place. Then it's about bringing everybody else along on that journey who necessarily doesn't come to those things. And I don't know how we do it. So if anybody here specialises in how you engage with the community, that's probably, you know, I'd be really interested, because I don't know how we get that buy-in. I don't know about you guys in terms of what you do. And
the age-old question, isn't it, of how to reach communities? They're hard to reach for a reason.
I think we have to have a certain awareness of, you know, we keep banging on about COVID, but you know, the reality is during COVID, a lot, you know, private car usage and ownership absolutely skyrocketed, because that was the only way a lot of people could travel. And I think we need to be aware of why people like them. They like it because they like the private space, they like it because they can listen to their own music, they like it because it's comfortable. And those are the kind of, you know, obviously we can't replicate all of that on public transport, but there's an element of, you know, I know I keep repeating myself, but it's that customer journey and experience. And I think if we can sort of align ourselves with that conversation and offer it to people as a real tangible alternative where they can still really enjoy themselves and enjoy their commute, I think that's a way of getting people on side. I think we need to be really, you know, on it with early engagement and getting people on side as best as we can, and, you know, making sure that we're considering everybody, especially areas of deprivation, and ensuring that everyone's on side.
Yeah, I think so. Early engagement and kind of the actual understanding of the users of the space, what works, what doesn't, is key. Things aren't, you can put whatever you want into a space, but people will only use it if they want to, and there's no point doing it if they don't want to use it. I think another kind of key piece that we haven't mentioned yet is the lessons learned, that we are trying, and there is a lot of kind of different mechanisms and schemes that we're using to engage with people and communities that I think as an industry we need to be better at sharing those lessons between us and understanding kind of what is working, what isn't, and that's how we will grow faster, and kind of get to reaching those hard to reach people sooner, as if we talk to each other more and learn from our mistakes or our successes.
I do think, because we're all Gen Z, and I feel like we all come into this industry and we look and we all think the same things, like corporate jargon, sustainability. And one of the ways we get through that is, rather than tell us what is a sustainable home, what is it? Most people won't know. But if you translate it into it's lower energy bills, that's a conversation most people understand. And so the question that I kind of have is, how do we do that, but for transport and for changing people interact with things? I live on a council estate in Birmingham, and my parents are unemployed, and I hadn't left Birmingham until I was like 16. And I didn't really know anything outside of Birmingham, and my parents never got a train, they never got a bus. I don't know why, they just didn't, but it's because they just didn't know. Or you can say they didn't know, but, and so the question is, I think from my perspective as, how can you convince my parents to change the way they're going to live? And I don't quite know how we do that. I think that's something we need to kind of flesh out, because I feel like, yes, we can reach out to them and communicate with them, and you can lead a horse to water, but you can't necessarily make it drink. But there's got to be something in the middle there somewhere that we can do better.
Something about the wraparound support for younger people, and not just like learning how to get the bus the first time you get the bus, but building that confidence on how to plan journeys and what it will look like if the bus breaks down and you have to get a secondary form of transport, or if the bus takes a different route and you don't know where you are, things like that. So I wonder if your parents never got the train, but if they had that support when they were younger, maybe that would have looked different for them, and then different for you as someone growing up in that environment where the confidence to travel is embedded from a young age.
That's a good point, actually, about confidence, isn't it, I suppose? I suppose it's about knowing what you can and can't do and having the confidence to go do it. It's like when you go to a conference for the first time, you lack confidence, don't you, because you don't quite know what to do. You don't quite know the norms that people do, and and I think it's about having that confidence to know I can go get a train to go here, or I can get a bus to go here, or I can, get a bike to go here, because that's a done thing that I would do, not something that someone in London would do, for example.
But it's also a trust that if you are going to get that bus is actually going to turn up in the place that you want it to, in the time that you want it to. So there's an element, I think devolution will go a long way ensuring that, that coordination and that trust, and we have those powers to make sure that the system is running in the way that we want to. And I think if we can prove that, then that brings people on side, because they, it's something they actually see as a viable option of getting from A to B. And I think, going back again, if you can put those real interchange points in where people can easily change modes, if they have bike storage on trains, for example, and there's actually a bike space available, you just want to make it as easy as possible to build that trust, build that confidence, and then the people will come.
It's using the tools available to you as well that's important. It's the fantastic Uber story of, would you rather wait kind of 5 maybe unknown amount of time, but it's going to be 5 minutes for a taxi, or it's going to be there in 6 minutes. What would you rather do? Most people would rather be able to see it coming along and know the time it's going to arrive, rather than wing it. If we have the ability to kind of give people the confidence through the tools we already have, we know where our buses are, we know kind of what the transport links are doing, we know where we have bike spaces. Maybe we need to make that more accessible to ensure that it is accessible for all, and communicating that, again, back to kind of communication piece, to make sure we are kind of getting the right engagement of people with our transport networks and with the kind of the new infrastructure and the new solutions we're bringing in.
I think that's a lovely point to end on, so thank you, panel. Before we close, I'm just going to ask you to give us one rapid fire takeaway that you're going to have from this discussion, or something you're excited about for the future, to end on a nice positive note. Maeve, would you mind starting?
I'll go first. I think that it's really encouraging coming to events like this, on a basic level, to know that other young people working in transport have the same thoughts, same ideas, same frustrations. It feels like good communication is happening, and if everybody is feeling the same way, there must be something that we can do about it.
I think I would actually take away the point that you made around the attention that autonomous vehicles gets and kind of the screen time that we have and how we all know about it, but actually the amount of a journey and transport and impact that they have probably is kind of far smaller than other things we should possibly be focusing on, and maybe it's being more tactical in how we look at our systems and what we do next.
I think I kind of agree with your point in terms of before you made about the fact that, you know, how can we use technology to kind of inform the data that we use to inform our transport decisions, and getting that foundation correct first. Because for me, before I came to this conversation, it was more about how do we communicate these things to people. But I think it's a bit of both, isn't it, really? It's about giving people the security that we're making the right decisions because we've got the right data, but then also communicating that as well. So I haven't quite appreciated the you know, the connection between those two, so probably that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really happy that we've spent time talking about people and how to bring people on side, because, you know, at the end of the day, we do this for our communities and we do this to increase accessibility, and we, you know, I think, yeah, honestly, the main thing I love to take away is that there's a room of people who actually want to hear what Gen Z have to say. And, you know, I think, as said in the intro, it's quite easy sometimes to feel a little bit disenfranchised because it feels like you walk into a room and there are certain stereotypes associated with you for no fault of our own. So yeah, I guess I'm grateful that you guys are here to listen to us, is my main takeaway, and it's given me a little bit of hope moving forward, I think.
Exactly, and on that note, if anyone would like to be involved in any of the future work we do around the conversations we've had in this panel, please reach out to us at the end or connect with us on LinkedIn. And apart from that, I hope you'll all join me in thanking our panel.